They were never meant to fight. They were farmers, shepherds, and runaways, men and women who had lost everything, their homes, their families, and even their freedom. But in a world ruled by chains and cruelty, the broken learned how to stand. This is the story of the army of the broken, the moment when slaves became soldiers, and soldiers became legends. Imagine the Roman Republic, a sprawling empire built on the backs of millions. In this world, slaves were everywhere, tilling the soil, paving the roads, serving masters who saw them not as people, but as tools. They were branded like livestock, bought and sold at markets, their lives worth less than the price of a good horse. To their masters, they were property. To the state, they were a resource. To everyone else, they were invisible. But in the heart of this system, in a place designed to entertain the masses with blood and death, a spark was about to ignite a fire that would threaten Rome itself. In the city of Capua, there was a school, a ludus, where men were trained to kill for sport. They were gladiators, forced to fight to the death for the roaring crowds. Among them was a Thracian, a man whose name would echo through history, Spartacus. He was a prisoner of war, sold into slavery, and destined for the arena. But Spartacus had something that Rome couldn't beat out of him, a refusal to die as someone else's entertainment. One day, he'd had enough. He and about 70 other gladiators decided they would rather die fighting for freedom than for the amusement of their captors. Armed with nothing more than kitchen knives and whatever they could grab from the gladiator school, armory, they fought their way out. They didn't just escape, they declared war. This wasn't a quiet escape into the night. It was a bloody, defiant breakout. They fled to the slopes of Mount Vesuvius, a perfect natural fortress. From there, they began to raid the rich estates of Campania. Rome, at first, barely noticed. They sent a small, hastily assembled militia under the praetor Gaius Claudius Glaber, expecting to squash this minor annoyance with ease. Glaber was so confident, he didn't even bother building a fortified camp. He simply blocked the only known path down the mountain, planning to starve the rebels out. He underestimated them. He saw them as slaves, not soldiers. That was his first mistake. Spartacus and his men, using wild vines, rappelled down a sheer cliff face on the other side of the volcano, circled around the Roman force, and launched a surprise attack. Glaber's militia was annihilated. It was a shocking, impossible victory, and word of it spread like wildfire. The slaves have risen. The message traveled on hushed whispers from plantation to plantation, from the fields of Sicily to the mines of southern Italy. It was a call to arms for the downtrodden. Thousands began to flock to Spartacus's banner. They weren't soldiers. They were shepherds with slings, farmers with pitchforks, miners with brute strength, and deserters from the Roman army itself who had seen enough. They were a chaotic, desperate mass of people united by a single, powerful idea: freedom. No one in the Roman Senate believed this rabble could ever stand against the might of the legions. They were about to be proven disastrously wrong. Spartacus faced an incredible challenge. He didn't just have an army to lead. He had to create one from scratch. His followers were a mix of different cultures, languages, and backgrounds. Many were filled with rage and a desire for blind revenge. But Spartacus knew that rage alone wouldn't defeat Rome. He needed discipline, strategy, and unity. He began to train them, turning chaos into order. He taught them Roman tactics, how to fight as a unit, how to hold a line. They forged weapons from whatever they could find, turning farming tools into spears, wagon wheels into shields, and their pain into unyielding courage. The broken were becoming an army. Rome sent another force, then another. Each time, the rebels, using guerrilla tactics and their knowledge of the terrain, outsmarted and defeated the legions sent against them. At its peak, the army of the broken numbered over 70,000 people, men, women, and children. It was a mobile nation of the dispossessed. The men who had once bowed their heads in servitude now stood shoulder to shoulder, not as slaves, but as soldiers fighting for their lives and their dignity. They learned to ambush Roman legions, to strike hard and fast, and then vanish into the mountains before Rome could retaliate. Each victory sent a tremor through the Republic. The message was clear and undeniable. We are not property, we are people. The Senate in Rome, which had initially laughed off the uprising as a minor peasant revolt, was now in a state of full-blown panic. This wasn't just a rebellion anymore. It was a war that threatened the very foundations of Roman society, which was built entirely on the concept of slavery. But what truly made this army different was its purpose. Spartacus's goal wasn't to conquer Rome or to install himself as a new king. His dream was far simpler and far more radical. He wanted to leave. His plan was to march his people north, cross the Alps, and allow everyone to return to their original homelands, to Gaul, to Thrace, to Germany. He fought not for power, but for an exit. His army wasn't built on hatred. It was built on the hope of a life beyond chains. But freedom is a dream that empires cannot tolerate. The existence of a successful slave army was an existential threat to Rome. The idea that property could just stand up and walk away was unthinkable. So Rome unleashed its full fury. The Senate, desperate, finally appointed a man with the resources and ruthlessness to end the war, Marcus Licinius Crassus. He was one of the wealthiest men in Rome, and he poured his personal fortune into raising a massive professional army. Crassus understood that this wasn't just about winning a battle, it was about re-establishing order. He was brutal, even reviving the practice of decimation, killing 1 in every 10 of his own soldiers to instill iron discipline in his legions after they fled from a battle with the rebels. Under his command, the tide began to turn. The legions became more cautious, more methodical. The rebels, burdened by thousands of non-combatants and dwindling supplies, found themselves pushed further and further south. Eventually, Crassus trapped Spartacus and his army in the toe of Italy. He built a massive wall, a line of fortifications stretching over 35 miles from coast to coast, complete with a ditch and palisade. The army of the broken was cornered, with the sea at their back and Crassus's legions in front. Winter set in. Starvation and disease began to ravage their camp. Their dream of freedom was turning into a nightmare. Spartacus knew the end was near. He could have tried to escape, perhaps sailing away to fight another day. But he chose to stay with his people. He gathered his men, those who remained, hungry, wounded, but still defiant, for one last stand. Legend says he had his horse brought to him, and he killed it in front of his army, declaring, "If we win, I shall have many better horses. If we lose, I shall not need one." He would fight on foot as one of them. They charged. In the final epic battle, the army of the broken threw themselves against the disciplined lines of Crassus's legions. It was a storm of pure defiance, a last, desperate gamble for a life they had only just begun to taste. They fought with the ferocity of people with nothing left to lose. But courage alone could not overcome the overwhelming numbers and superior organization of the Roman war machine. The rebel army was shattered. They fell that day not as slaves, but as free men and women choosing their own end. Spartacus himself fought his way to the front, trying to reach Crassus, but was cut down in the chaos. His body was never identified, lost among the thousands of others. He simply vanished into legend. After the battle, Crassus captured 6,000 survivors. To make an example of them, to burn the idea of rebellion out of the minds of every slave in the Republic, he had them all crucified along the Appian Way, the main road leading to Rome. For miles, the road was lined with crosses, a gruesome warning to anyone who dared to dream of freedom. Rome had won. The rebellion was crushed. But something had fundamentally changed. The army of the broken had proven that even the most oppressed, the most dehumanized, could rise up and shake the foundations of the most powerful empire in the world. They showed that strength isn't something you're born with. It's forged in pain, in fire, and in the sheer refusal to kneel. Their story became a legend, a symbol of the timeless struggle for freedom against oppression that has inspired people for 2,000 years. Because the greatest armies aren't always made of professional soldiers. Sometimes they're made of ordinary people who have simply had enough. Thank you so much for watching. If this story moved you, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel for more stories like this. We'd love to have you as part of our community. See you in the next one.